Hello chess friends and welcome to that of Chess channel and welcome back to the Oslo Esports Cup in 2022. So we're following now a beautiful and epic match game between the world champion Magnus Carlsen and the famous chess bro Erik Hansen. So this tournament has been really incredible so far because yesterday Ramesh Babu Pragananda was in the lead, but today unfortunately he lost his game against Jan Krzysztof Duda, which meant now that Magnus Carlsen had the opportunity to again take the lead with the win against Erik Hansen. So what to say about Chessbrad's performance so far? I think he's playing very good. It's not a problem that he's losing many games, but it's I think a very cool thing for the chess community that the famous streamer like Erik Hansen is playing in the tournament. And actually I've been asked now many times which are my favorite chess channels on YouTube when I follow some other channels. Actually the Chessbrad chess channel, when it comes to watching chess streams, is one of my favorite chess channels. When it comes to learning chess, I like the remote chess academy. If you haven't followed it, really it's something worth to study. You have there Igor Smirnov, a grandmaster from Russia. His teaching style is really incredible. It's really also one of my favorite channels. So as I said, these two channels are really my favorite. Especially I like the fact that Erik Hansen is having great music. I was also part of the techno world in one part of my life. So as I said, I really love his chess channel. I like his style. He's of course a little bit loose sometimes, but it doesn't matter. He's still a young fellow, and of course he has some fun. He's I think playing really great chess, especially his bullet chess performances are also great. We have seen, for instance, that he can also beat Hikaru Nakamura. He can also beat Alireza in bullet chess, which is really incredible performance. So as I said, he wasn't maybe the favorite in the tournament, but for the chess community it was a great thing that he participated. So let's see now what happened. It was an incredible game. I think that they played the one in the round 3. It was a semi-Tarrasch defense game, and I think the semi-Tarrasch defense is still so unexplored because it has some tricky endgame ideas. I'll explain what I mean about that, because also we have recently started this semi-Tarrasch defense. We have studied it recently on my YouTube chess channel. I've introduced to you the most important strategical ideas of this opening, so you can also check it out. Here's the link of our whole semi-Tarrasch defense. So let's see now how Erik Hansen and Magnus Carlsen pulled off this very nice opening. So here Magnus played with the white pieces and opened with the move d4. Knight to f6 was played by Erik Hansen. We have c4. After move e6, we have now maybe an invitation to go into the Nimzo Indian if, for instance, white plays the move knight to c3, but Magnus plays knight to f3 and plays now the anti-Nimzo Indian. So here after move d5 was played, we have now the queen's gambit declined, and after move knight to c3, we have reached now the 3 knights variation of the queen's gambit decline. So now comes the move c5, and the c5 is now the semi-Tarrasch defense move, which is now of course the direct attack against the center. What you should do is of course always take care of your center, because many things can happen that could go wrong. I think for you, what you should not get here is an isolated pawn. So that's why many times white is simply taking the pawn, and then after potential, I don't know, e takes d5, black could be also challenged with d takes c5, then black is continuing the game with an isolated pawn. So now these days the most popular line is the move knight to d5, which Erik Hansen also played, and now comes the move e4, which is now direct attack against the knight. And many times of course we have this exchange variation, knight to c3, b takes c3, and after c takes d4 we have reached now the common semi-Tarrasch exchange variation line with c takes d4. And okay, let's stop and evaluate the position. Many things can be said already about this position. The downside for white, I think, a little bit in these lines is that we have traded already many pieces off, because here bishop to b4 can happen. That was also Erik Hansen's continuation. Then bishop to d2, we have bishop to d2 and queen to d2. So the game is more and more simplified. That's I think something that white doesn't want to get out of the opening stage. White wants to many times have still many pieces on the board. White wants to create attacking chances. White wants to create attacking formations and similar stuff. Now when we have already traded 2 pieces off the board, it's not so easy maybe to create some kind of a dynamic. And we should always watch now this position from an endgames perspective. I'll explain you what I mean about this, because it's not so easy now also for white to play this game. We should not really study now this position from a point, I don't know, what happens if I play bishop to c4, what happens if my opponent plays knight to c6, what happens if he plays a6. So you should not really study this opening just by heart. You should really study it from an endgames perspective, because what I mean about is, if for instance this game, this this position, this pawn structure reaches the endgame stage. So if we could just imagine this position without minor pieces, without rooks, without queens on the board, then actually black is winning here, because black is here the possibility to create a distant pass pawn, and that's something that white should never forget. So a simplification idea here for white is not working. White, when it comes to a middle game stage, so we're not talking about the end game stage now, from a middle game stage, so we're still here in the middle game stage, white has a slightly advantage because we have here still the two centralized pawns, which are of course controlling this other side of the board. So from a middle game's perspective, white is slightly better, but if the game reaches now the end game stage, then black should be better because, as we said, of the possibility to create a distant pass pawn. So this is something that you should never, but really never forget. And as I said, you should not really study this opening just by heart, just learn maybe some computer chess engine lines. If what happens if I play now bishop to c4, should I meet it with bishop to d7 or knight to c6? You know what I'm trying to say. So now you should just watch it from an endgame's perspective. So here after move queen to d2, we have kingside castling, rook to c1, pretty normal move here by Magnus Carlsen, occupying now the only open file. And now we have b6, we have bishop to d3, and now bishop to b7 by Eric Hansen. So you should not be also surprised here from white perspective if black plays the move bishop to a6. This will happen also many times, so don't forget about this, because as we said, black wants to reach this position. Black wants to reach a position where we don't have any minor pieces of the board, where the position is more simplified. Even queen trades we want to make here from black perspective. We want to get the rooks off the board, we want to get the knights off the board. So this is now the main strategical goal. So here after move bishop to b7, here Magnus Carlsen simply kingside, and knight to d7, and now queen to f4. We have h6 trying to get maybe here also the move g5. That's why h4 here was played by Magnus Carlsen. So we have now knight to f6, and now comes also a very important moment of the semi-Tarrasch ideas, which we have talks about really on my YouTube chess channel. This was also one of my or one of our main strategical goals that I think you have to know if you're playing the game now from white perspective. There is now this beautiful gambit line, and the gambit line leads now into a bad bishop situation for black. So we're sacrificing one pawn, but we're paralyzing a little bit black's pieces. So as I said, from middle game's perspective, we have to make something with these two centralized pawns. If we don't make anything with these two pawns, then the game would be simply too simplified. So that's why here d5 is the crucial idea that you have to recognize in these types of structures. So after move d5, we have e takes d5, but now we don't want to take, of course. That is not the point of this gambit line. We want to pass through now with the move e5. And here Eric had some chances to strike back. He played now the move knight to e4, we attacking simply the center of the board. Here in the continuation we have now knight to d4, although here you could also in after move d5, you don't have to immediately, I think, take the pawn. You can also attack the queen, but I think this move knight to h5 Eric Hansen recognized, and he is probably familiar with this theory in the semi-Tarrasch defense. This line I think would lead into perpetual, because queen to g4 could be played, then of course knight to f6, then again queen to f4, because white cannot retreat here. Let's go back. If for instance knight to h5 happens, you cannot go with queen to e3, then e takes d5 can happen, and then even if you try this idea, e5, then I think d5 is perfectly fine, and then after knight to d4, then black can also take out the pawn on h4. So now at least the bishop is liberated. But after move d5, you see e takes d5, now e5, and you see now this bishop is a little bit paralyzed. It's blocked out by its own pawn, so now this diagonal is not open. So that's what I mean about the bad bishop strategy, when we sacrifice the pawn but we paralyze a little bit black's pieces. So here in the continuation we have knight to e4, knight to d4, and now bishop to c8. You have to play this move. This is now very important what Eric recognized, because if you play something like rook to c8, look what happens now. Be prepared. This is now brutal, super brutal chess. And although many pieces are off the board, and although this position is a little bit simplified, but believe me, there are so many potential attacks here. Here for instance, after move rook to c8, we should simply make progress with the move knight to f5. That's why it's very important to play first bishop to c8 to control the f5 square. Now if you control just the c file, it's not enough. Okay, you could maybe simplify again here from black perspective, trade off the rooks. But now for instance, if you try to get out of this mess, then we have even this possibility as the beautiful tactical shot, knight to h6, g takes h6, queen to h6. Now you have to play king to g8, and now comes the stunner. Okay, this wasn't played in the game, but maybe pause the video and try to see now the best continuation here for white. It's a winning continuation, so take your time. It's just for fun. Let's see now really some dirty tactics that are possible here for white. So as I said, this wasn't played in the game, but I wanted to show you how still tactically rich this position can become, although there are not so many pieces on the board. So try to see now the best continuation. Okay, the beautiful move is of course rook to c3. You cannot take out the rook because you get checkmated on h7, and now you have to create some new defensive pieces. You have to include them into the game, and now after move d4 we can immediately take bishop to e4, but now rook to g3 is going to happen. You have to cover now with the bishop, and now with h5. This is still of course a completely winning game here for white. So this is now beautiful tactical shot that's possible. So we're getting back now to this position. As we said, bishop to c8 has to be played here by Erik Hansen. So we have rook to c6. So Magnus takes over here because Erik left now the progress here. He left the protection of the c6 square. Now Magnus occupies it immediately. So we have bishop to d7. We have bishop to e4. This is now a beautiful tactical shot that Magnus Carlsen pulled off, because this wasn't also played in the game. But if you play bishop takes c6, if you take out the rook, then first we can take knight takes c6. It comes of course with a direct threat against the queen, so that's why the queen has to step back here, has to play queen to d7. But now we can actually take out this pawn, and of course if you take, then you get the fork on e7. So this is not working, so white is continuing then the game with two minor pieces for the rook. So that's not simple possible here for black. So that's why after move bishop to e4, first you have to take d takes e4, and now Magnus has time to activate the rook on a very nasty square, on a very annoying square. Look at this rook. It's such a powerful rook in the center of the board. Now black is facing many positional problems. So we have now queen to e7, we have a rook to e1, attacking the pawn on e4, rook from a to c8, and now rook takes e4. We have rook to c3, we have king to h2. So Magnus is just lifting here his king. Now all of his pawns, all of his pieces are above the second rank. Even if black manages to attack somehow the first rank, it doesn't make sense. Black cannot include further pieces into the attack, so it's very nice sometimes to just lift your pieces towards the second rank, even if it's possible maybe to the third rank. So here we have a rook to e8 by Erik Hansen, and now knight to e2. And here Magnus recognized the possibility that he could maybe be attacked on the e-file, so that's why his maneuver knight to e2, knight to g3 is beautiful, because he wants to have a further protection of the rook. But now if black plays, for instance, the move f6, it seems so that maybe black could trap here the pawn, at least get the pawn, because actually it seems so that you cannot take the pawn, but that's exactly what you should do here. So far this e-file attack is not working. I'm sure that somewhere Magnus Carlsen had this in mind, that he prepared here really a dirty trap against Erik, because after e takes f6, okay, you can maybe take out here the rook on e4, but now comes the beautiful tactical shot f7. And now what to do, you have to play something like king to h7 or king to h8. The same thing will happen, nothing dramatically changed. Even if you play king to h8, the same position as we said after f7, king to h7. Now we play queen to e4, but now the rook gets deflected from the 8th rank, and now we can promote a new queen. You can take out maybe the knight, but we'll take out also the bishop. So again, a completely winning endgame here for white. So after move knight to e2, Erik didn't play the move f6. He recognized that nothing is going to happen here on the e-file, played simply rook to c6, and now a beautiful move by Magnus, as we said, a beautiful maneuver, knight to e2 and then knight to g3 in order to protect the rook on e4. So here we have rook takes d6, e takes d6, attacking the queen. We have queen to d8, and now rook to c4. And now comes also one of the critical moments. Maybe here bishop to e6 should have been played by Erik Hansen, because we have said Magnus is trying to occupy the f5 square. This is now a beautiful square for the knight. Here Erik played rook to e6, which of course gave here Magnus Carlsen the opportunity to occupy f5 immediately. But f5 you should not play immediately. Now you should play, for instance, first the move rook to c7. Here Magnus with the move knight to f5 played a slightly inaccurate move, because here Erik didn't play then the correct move. He played king to h8, but actually knight to f5 can be met with the move g5 immediately, and this would be now a drawish position, because after h takes g5, the queen has to step back somewhere, and now with queen to f6 you can defend everything. Maybe white can include maybe the rook into the game now with rook to c7, but now we can create a check. Maybe you can cover yourself with the knight, but now we can take out also this pawn, and this should be probably a draw. But here after move instead of move knight to f5, here Magnus should have played rook to c7 immediately without playing the move knight to f5. If black maybe retreats now with the bishop, then knight to f5, it's now a different story, because if you try now g5, then h takes g5, but now with queen to d4 we're threatening really here immediately the checkmate on g7. That's why you have to cover. But now when we trade off the queens, now there is a bishop on the 8th rank, and now with d7 this is game over for black. So as I said, knight to f5 was a little bit rushed. g5 should have been played here by Erik Hansen, but unfortunately he played now the main mistake in the game. He played now king to h8, and from this point on the game is over. Magnus is taking over. He's activating the knight on a better square on a7, where the knight cannot be of course attacked by any minor piece. This is now this octopus knight that is controlling really many squares on the board. We have knight to e7, rook to f6. Now Magnus steps back with queen to d4, a5. We have king to g1, we have rook to e6, and now Magnus is just trying to reroute here the rook, and rook is trying of course to attack the pawn on g7. So here bishop to e8 comes a little bit late, because we have rook to g3 attacking now the pawn on g7. We have rook to f6, and now a beautiful move here by Magnus Carlsen, knight to f5. If you take of course, then queen takes g7 is checkmate. So that's why here Erik Hansen tried the move g6, but it's risky. Now again knight to e7 is cutting off of course the connection between the queen and the rook. The rook is not protected anymore because black played g7. You have to play here queen to d6, and now comes a beautiful move again by Magnus Carlsen, knight to d7. This was now the most annoying knight here. The rook is attacked. You can maybe just try to prolong the game by playing king to g7. Magnus can of course immediately take and then go into a maybe slightly favorable endgame where he could have the rook versus the bishop, but he plays now the correct move. He plays first rook to d3, and it's not the point that he's trying to create some madness here. He's trying actually to play g4 and then g5. Here in the continuation we have b5 by Erik, now g4, and after g5 now comes f4. In this position Erik Hansen resigns. Whatever you do, if you take out of course with the pawn, then g5 is simply trapping the rook. So as I said, after move f4, Erik Hansen resigned. So what to say, a really great game. I think many beautiful ideas of the semi-Tarrasch defense have been applied here. If you want to cover and see more about this opening, please check out my semi-Tarrasch defense series. We have analyzed really great methods for white and for black. Here's the link of the series, and if you want to see maybe some other games that we have analyzed so far, you can also check out our previous analyzed games. Now for the tournament, it means now that Magnus is in the lead, which is also a very good for thing for the tournament. Tomorrow he has the opportunity to of course to be the winner. Every tournament Magnus Carlsen has played so far, he won, which is really incredible in 2022. So as he also mentioned, he's still the best player in the world. He didn't mean it really in the interview that he gave a couple of days ago in a rude way, but actually he was right when he said that he's still the best player in the world. So great stuff, great ideas. As I said, here's the link of our semi-Tarrasch defense, and here are some links of some games that you can also see from that we have analyzed so far. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best of course.